Yo,
Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Super excited. We got Greg on The Collective for the first time, but you've been on the Gold Mine, well, maybe the second time, because, right, we were still running The Collective in the first year. Sometimes hard to remember where those things come in, but while I can't remember to do things, y'all should actually do the things. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff, get your emails whenever we go live, which of course, Fridays for The Collective and Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. I want to say, Seb, man, good to see you back. You're in town. Good to have you on. And
for a couple days.
for a couple days, and then he's out again. If anybody out there has any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We can hit those throughout the show, and we're going to have a great conversation. I'm already liking the vibe in the room. Shaun, how are you doing in the mountains there?
I'm doing well, but have you done your full intro already, or?
Oh, no, not yet. I'm
okay.
Just jumping in. I'm trying something new.
Maybe we'll try something old for a little while.
Okay.
SOP. SOP.
If anybody hasn't yet signed up for the newsletter, make sure you do. That is the reinforcement loop, keeps everyone in the loop on everything Collective. That goes out every Sunday and has a little bit of Shaun's thoughts in there. This is awesome. So let's go around. We're going to get a little hitter of everybody. Greg, 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
Greg Cooper. I'm a now professional judo coach starting in September at Kodakwai Judo Club. Performance coach and on the lifelong pursuit of challenging myself and doing hard things.
Yeah, and nothing harder than judo. That is one of the most brutal sports. I love it. Seb, how's life out on the mountain treating you?
Very good, man. You start judo in your 40s and you explode on impact. Things are good.
Whistles go off. I love it.
Precisely. Yeah, things are good, man. It's been a busy morning, and I'm glad to sort of catch a break to link up with you boys.
Love it. Shaun, how's the mountains treating you?
Yeah, things are good. Speaking of judo, that was my very first martial art I ever took, and it's so legit. And what since the topic is at hand, what I didn't understand about judo until I started BJJ was how grounded you are in judo. Like, your base posture structure is so good that I feel like you actually don't learn base posture structure quite as well in BJJ as you do in judo. So that's just a challenge out there for all the BJJers. If you think you've got good base posture structure, try judo and see if you do.
That is a great point. And I remember we had Alan Shabaro on here a couple times, and I still, to this day, anytime I get a really big throw, judo style, I go Shabaro, just cause. Well, Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about it? Because judo is it's a thing in and of itself. Give us a little rundown.
Okay, I'm gonna try not to ramble on too much, but Shaun, excellent point on the grounded part, because a lot of judo coaches and judoka will talk about the ground up, and we start with the gymnastics base, if you will, understanding the control of your body. We call that tai sabaki, body control. So somersaults, cartwheels, balance, and then from there, break falls. And then once we do get into the grappling and grabbing onto another judo player, it's balance. If your posture gets broken, that is when the judo match is lost or won. Especially the higher level we get at world championships, Olympics, it's a matter of millimeters. And if you don't have that core, if you slip for a second, fight's over. Because in judo, unlike a lot of grappling sports, if you get thrown flat on your back, that's it. Fight's done. Could be 5 seconds. It could be a 10-minute fight. But one slip and you're done. So the basis of it is so rooted in balance. And I would argue that outside of maybe an Olympic gymnast, judo players have the best balance in the world.
I dig it. I totally agree too, because I actually watched a little documentary just a little while ago about this, in the fact that judo, because it's so old and it's so regulated, and it's been so regulated for so long, that the players in high level judo are just so astronomically better than like in the international realm, especially in Japan, where their skill sets they're insane. They're just insane.
Yeah, but there's many martial arts that are insane
True.
that require a lot of skill. And that we could put judo up against, and judo would be like confused by it. And so same for the other martial art, it would be confused by judo. So each martial art brings something to the table. And though judo is very base posture structure, very grounded, and again, you won't even understand what I just said unless you go out into the forest and grab a tree and try to throw it. But you can't, because it's grounded, it's rooted, unlike anything that you've probably experienced before, unless you've grabbed a judo player. They feel like a tree planted in the earth. And the only way that you can move that tree out of the earth is if you're another good judo player. And so you might move it around a touch as a BJJ player for sure, but you'll never understand base posture structure unless you start studying it through the art of judo. And I say that not casually, because as a BJJ player, I think the reason that you might not understand it as well as a judo player, it's because you don't have to, because it isn't central to your art. If you do understand base posture structure really well, fantastic. You don't have to, because the moment that you start getting moved around, you can easily flow with it and take advantage of it on the ground. So I've never been to a BJJ club where they say at the start of the class, do not go to the ground. This will only be standing, and don't let yourself be thrown. I just haven't. And so if there's BJJ clubs out there that are starting the class off with do not allow yourself to be moved or thrown, then I'd love to attend. But that's called judo. So I know that I'm gonna. I can see Seb starting to get a bit irritated down there.
No, not at all.
But the reason anyone right now might be a little irked, it's because you're missing the spirit of my message. I'm not being specific. I'm being generalistic. And the fact remains that judo is the way it is because that's what it focuses on. It's not because it's 1 billion years old, and it's not because they have a secret sauce. They just have a focus on base posture structure.
Well, I want to touch on this because I want nice eye, Seb. I want to bring this into the concept of the long game, because I think that's what it takes. Because to get good at anything, you have to spend the time doing it. And the one thing that judo does really well is drill. Like, I have seen these guys hit drill at just thousands upon thousands of repetitions to do a move, because as Greg said, you have one shot. And if you slip on it, it's gone. You're going to hit the mat. So I want to touch on the long game, get your guys' thought initially on that, perhaps in the martial arts realm or in any other realm. What do you think? Stebman, hit you first.
Thanks, Chance. First of all, I absolutely love judo, and I think that most of the greatest takedowns I've ever completed in any martial arts were, albeit not at the level that judo player would have them, but it was judo based, right? And one of the things that I really like to teach when I teach classes, especially to Leos, is not to rely only on one modalities when it comes to takedown. So if you have takedowns from 5 different modalities, then you never run out of option, right? And I think that the fact that BJJ players are making so many strategic and tactical mistakes when they are playing the judo game or the stand-up game is perfect if you have any level of judo whatsoever, because it takes you a yellow belt to beat the average BJJ player, kind of deal. But when it comes to posture structure base, it's an extremely important concept, even on the ground. And it creates a lot of issues. That is exactly how you're going to break the guard. That is exactly how you're going to open up the person. That's exactly how you're going to sweep. So all of those things are incredibly important. Now, you have gyms that are very, very proficient at teaching that. Matt Kwan is one of them. So On Guard, for example. And of course, Rob Biernacki, who started kind of that structure, posture, base, centric, fundamental BJJ teaching. So there are a lot of clubs out there that are teaching it now because these guys have been winning everything. Rob is a multi-time world champion. Matt Kwan is one of the best in the world, really. And so those guys are now running clubs that are in which in which structure, posture, base is a fundamental tenet, if not, interconnect into absolutely every other technique. And so I do believe that there's a lot of club out there that do not, and I think that that's a massive failing on our part to to recognize and to start getting our people used to sort of creating those opportunities by considering that. And it's not just a consideration, it's a physical consideration, it's an engagement, it has to be fundamentally in there. Now when it comes to drilling, it's really interesting because judo is really the probably one of the martial arts that drills the most, and they are very good at what they're doing. And so there's no denying that that's working. But now we have a wind of change in the BJJ world where people are going away from drilling and engaging in something called the ecological approach, which is more about essentially creating a situation. And I'm not an expert on it, so please don't quote me, just look it up for yourselves. But it's basically creating a set of circumstances and letting the person figure out a way out of that situation and let them essentially drill realistically with an opponent that's actually resisting. And so, and I know that in randori there's levels of resistance and all this stuff. And so it's not to say that judo doesn't do that, but it's really interesting to me that people seem to be in the jiu-jitsu community here, all over the world, really sort of stepping away from drilling when drilling in judo is so instrumental to the performance. And so there is something there that, and I'm assuming just like anything else that we do as human beings, we tend to go black or white. We either do all of a thing or none of a thing. I think probably the answer is somewhere in the middle, but those are my thoughts initially.
I dig it. Greg, what do you got?
I loved Seb's note on drilling, because that piece of judo it's not unique, but it's definitely unanimously by most judo coaches is how we train. But it also creates longevity in a way, because I want to talk about the long game, and I'm going to talk a little bit more general as well. I talk about this lots. My friends Tommy and Josh talk about this lots too. In drilling, in anything you're doing, you still need to play. Whatever you do, if you don't play, it becomes too rigid and too pigeonholed. And this is where you can get too hyper-focused on certain things. Now, when we talk about playing, you still need to play your game. So if you've been drilling a certain sequence, a gripping sequence, into a movement pattern, into a throw, and maybe you have a combination there. If you focus on that play, now I'm kind of using it in a different way, you will create a result. But you have to play in the sense that you can't be afraid to get thrown. You can't be afraid to lose. This season, it was the first time I competed since I was a junior athlete. And my training partner, Warren, is one of the best players in the world. He got third he got a bronze medal at the Worlds. Great training partner. He knew what throws I was working on. So he was the hardest person in the world to throw, because he knew, if Greg grabs here, he's going to go for kataguruma. Well, then I had to play the game and learn how to disguise that, move the patterns around. So yes, drilling is important. Putting in the reps is important, but you still have to play if you want that longevity, because then it remains fun and it remains loose. Because especially at a young age, when we have athletes starting judo at 5-6 years old, when they have a high level of proficiency, good physical literacy, my biggest worry as a coach is burnout. This kid loves the sport. They're good at it. They have lots of early talent. Let's hope this kid doesn't get burnt out. So I remind them to play judo, play soccer, play other things, play life. And that is a big piece of longevity, in my opinion.
I dig that, man. And the curiosity aspect of it, being able to drop into that playful sense of like, I wonder, what if I do, and what if I do that, and what maybe this grip? Yeah, I love it. Shaun, what do you got?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First one is I gotta call out Rob Bernacki for his base posture structure, just as Seb rightfully mentioned Rob's name, because I mean I've been playing with base posture structure as long as everyone else has on the panel. I mean, we've all played in that game a long time, but I just never had the base posture structure 3 words rattled off quite as easily as that. I've said base posture structure so many times now because of Rob Bernacki that it doesn't feel like my idea. It just feels like a sentence that isn't complete until I say the 3rd word, base posture structure. Now I can continue on with my sentence because of Rob Bernacki. So thanks, Seb, for that. The idea behind judo. So we're talking about the long game, and I mentioned that judo was the very first martial art that I got involved in. And I didn't think we were going to get all martial artsy, so I hope that wasn't my fault. But this does play out well now, because I said that it was the first martial art that I started studying, but studying is a loose term because I didn't enter into a club to formally start doing judo. My dad showed me a few things, and they were street things. They were street judo. They weren't fancy boy judo. They weren't competition judo. They were like stuff that he taught me to not survive the streets of England, but it's just things that he thought were legit. And it was only a handful of things. And I didn't know what they were called. I just knew that if I did this, they went to the ground. Didn't know the name. So that's how I started. Now, flash forward to I'm in the military and I'm in the Canadian Airborne Regiment, and I am now an unarmed combat instructor. And so, like, we're being taught judo as part of the unarmed combat instructor's course, but we weren't being taught all of the formal Japanese names, and we weren't being taught base posture structure in a sentence. Here's what we were being taught: judo in combat with each other without a whole pile of formal instruction. We were just like pounding on each other. I mean, it was like a street fight every day for the full day, and then showing up the next day to face the same guy who's wearing a flak vest with a evil look in his eye, about to throw me again. And so there was no formal training per se in judo. What there was a lot of discovery. Some of it was fun and some of it wasn't. But how you learn how to do a proper break fall is when you're thrown on like hard dirt, because we didn't have mats. And so I'm going to tie all of this now into the long game. So when I started BJJ, I started on my 52nd birthday. So I'm coming up on my 10th year of BJJ. When I showed up to the club, one of the very first things we were doing was some judo. And I was like, how come this BJJ stuff isn't working? You can hardly move me. You can hardly do anything. And it's because the person I was playing with had never done judo. And I didn't understand that my base posture structure was really good because I'd used it so many times informally. I didn't even know that I was formally trained in base posture structure. And so, make a very long story short, flash forward a bunch more months, and my coach said to me, "We're going to do some throws." And I said, "Good, I love throws. But, we've only got thin mats." "Good, let's go." And so he went to throw me and he babied me over. And so when you get babied over in judo throw, like when you get soft thrown, there's a chance you're going to get hurt more than if you get proper throwing. And so he babied me over, and I looked up at him. I said, "Dude, freaking throw me. Like, that's what we're here for. Don't worry about me. You're not going to break me." And the long game for me in that moment was simply this. I learned judo throws on dirt. We took actually great pride in not being broken as our partners tried to break us. So for decades, I had this idea of, frickin' bring it, judo throw. I love getting smashed off of the ground with gravity. I do. I've got a good break fall. I appreciate the satisfying ripple of energy that moves through my body as I kinetically disperse it and then get to it. I love that feeling, man. But you know how long it took to love that feeling of kinetic energy dump? That was not day one. Because day one was all stars and Tweety birds flying around my head as I looked up at the sky and thought, wow, that hurt. And so the long game. If someone is in their later phases of life and they're thinking like, oh, these guys are talking about judo and the first throw and they're going to blow up like a hand grenade, maybe. But maybe that's what you need.
Maybe. Maybe. Greg, what do you got?
Well, I'll say this for individuals in later seasons of life, or honestly anybody, because this is how I connect judo to everything else I do. Whether I'm doing coaching with an individual that knows nothing about martial arts. But judo has two guiding principles. First, maximum efficiency. Pretty straightforward. The second one, I touch on way more. Mutual welfare and benefit. Yeah, I'm going to throw you really hard, but I'm not trying to hurt you. In a dojo, in competition, right? If it's on the street, well, maybe, depending on the scenario. But those two principles, I think, create such longevity in the sport, because if we focus on those two things, no matter what we're doing, no matter what we're drilling, no matter what scenario is in front of us, we'll go. Because one, if you're efficient, you're not wasting energy. And two, mutual welfare and benefit. Well, if you're a jerk, nobody's going to want to train with you, be around you, work with you, anything. So those are two pieces that I'd be remiss not to mention.
I do love that. We say that a lot in my gym, is don't break your toys. Like, if you want to keep playing, don't break your toys, because that's what happens is people get broken, and then you have less people to train with. I love where this is going so far. I just want to hit on a few of these comments from the beginning here. I got Brendan jumping in here. He says, hope you guys are doing good, lads. Good to see you, buddy. And then we got Catherine jumped in here. Looking forward to listening to today's podcast. Lisa Myers in here as well. Daniel Labonte. Good afternoon, Collective Family. Hope all are well. Dan C is here. Good day, gentlemen. Let's kick some ass. Lots of people in here chatting away in the background, and I love it. Daniel actually jumped in here as well as said, essentials of mastering your fundamentals prior to going further. And I think this is the thing I want to start with as well in the long game conversation, is mastering those fundamentals, building the structure, the base, and the posture to utilize them in the future of whatever game you're playing. Because when you stop and think about it, those three things, base, posture, structure, play into everything. You want to be a blacksmith with poor posture, bad structure, and no, you're going to hurt yourself. You're not going to be able to do it in the long term. You want to be a swimmer. You want to do freaking ERT stuff like Seb used to do. All the things need a base posture structure. So, which in my mind comes down to the mastering of fundamentals. What do you guys think? Seb, I'm going to come to you again. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I like the thought of that, and I think we can play with that certainly from a philosophical standpoint. I mean, if you're looking at base, for example, maybe that's your purpose, and maybe the posture is your actions, and maybe the structure is your discipline, for example, or your structure system around the actions that you're going to be taking to achieve a certain set outcome. I like that, and I'm certainly not saying that those are the right words for the that necessarily these things, and we can certainly play with that, but to say that fundamentally you need to have, and again, and this is going straight back, not to go back in the martial arts talk, but going straight back to what Shaun was talking about, I think that the mistake that several clubs are making and people are making in themselves is wanting to be all these other things. I'm going to learn on these fancy moves, I'm going to do all these things, but really I don't even have the fundamentals squared away. So you can be engaging in life in a variety of different things, in a variety of different realms with all kinds of good intentions. But if you don't even have a why sorted, if you don't know what your purpose is, if you don't know how you operate when velocity is increased in the direction of travel, good luck. I mean, you may do, and what's interesting with that is if you make again a metaphor with martial arts, you may get a throw. You may be lucky. You may get several. Who knows? And what happens then is it reinforces the fact that you can do this despite the fact that you don't have the fundamentals. But we're not talking about average here. We're talking about you wanting to optimize yourself. And so if you're looking at optimizing yourself, then being lucky from time to time or having the ability to do it on somebody that's mediocre isn't the end goal, or should not be the end goal. And so I think we can play with that a bit.
Dig it. Greg, what are you thinking?
I'm so happy he said the word lucky. Seb, thank you for that. Because that, in my opinion, is the quick gratification. That's the short-term win. Oh, I got lucky, I made it big. Oh, I got lucky, I won the lottery. Oh, I got lucky, I threw this guy that I hadn't thrown in my whole life. But if you focus on the fundamentals and you start mastering a fundamental or a few fundamentals or all of them, depending on your level of capability, then you create longevity. Then the reps matter. Because again, using judo, some of the very first throws we learn, I use Osotogari as one, leg sweep. That's the most used throw in international judo competition. And it's the first or second throw you're going to learn. So you're telling me fundamentals don't work in the long game? Fundamentals are integral to the long game. And I think a lot of the times people in whatever they're doing overthink tremendously. I talk to my athletes all the time about keeping it simple. What is the fundamental movement pattern we're looking at? Sure, the throw's new, it's unique, maybe it's a different grip, but at the end of the day, think simple. I heard this really great baseball analogy from a baseball coach. I can't remember which university, but collegiate level. When his pitchers are in their head, they're throwing off, they're starting to throw balls, they're maybe hitting a pitcher. He asked them, what is your goal as a pitcher? And they come up with all these answers. Oh, well, if I only get 3 walks and get on base, and they stumble. But a pitcher's goal, in this coach's opinion, was to play catch with the back catcher. If the only other person that touches the baseball in that game is the back catcher, that's the job. Don't worry about who's in between you. Don't worry about left batter, right batter. Play catch. So simplify, focus on the fundamentals, do your job, do your reps, and you'll create longevity in whatever you do.
I dig that a lot. I like play catch with the catcher. Don't worry. I'm down with that. Shaun, what do you got?
I like it because it's goal driven, or it's focus driven, or it's clarity driven. There's a clear goal assigned, and it doesn't mean you're gonna like nail your clear directive every single day, but at least you're working towards something with clarity. But I want to play with that because we're talking about fundamentals to some degree, and I think that there's going to be people out there that are thinking the fundamentals, you get those by signing up to a dojo or finding a Jedi master and getting under their wing. And then for years and years, you toil away in the silence as you learn all of these fundamentals, 107 drills that you've got to memorize and you've got to practice 1,000 times. Well, I suppose that's a form of fundamentals, but there's other fundamentals, or there's other fundamental ways to learn fundamentals. And one of the fundamental ways is you don't need an instructor, you don't need a Jedi master, but you need a lot of reps. You need so many reps that you make all of the mistakes that a mentor or a coach or a Jedi master would like help move you through, so that you didn't have to learn all of the mistakes. You've got to pursue some things in life by yourself to learn the lessons that you need to learn. And so I don't want anyone out there to think that the moment we start speaking about fundamentals, the only way you can move forward is by tying on a white belt and starting to learn the 107 moves. Because I didn't learn them. What I learned was this. There's a dude standing in front of me wearing green combat material. I would reach out and grab a collar, twist it, and then I would reach up and grab their other arm and throw them over my hip with this goal in mind. I'm going to tear the sleeve right off of their combat uniform. And I was not satisfied until the first time I tore a sleeve off of a combat uniform. And as it turns out, by the way, it was a Canadian Airborne Regiment multi-pattern or a camouflage pattern jump smock. When I heard that jump smock sleeve tear, it was one of the most satisfying noises I'd ever heard. I mean, when a parachute opens, it's satisfying. Maybe the second most satisfying thing was tearing that sleeve off. And once you've torn a sleeve off, you know you can do it again. And that is fundamentals. And so there's many ways to achieve fundamentals. I don't want anyone out there to think you got to memorize 107 moves. There's the other way that I did it with no memorization is a lot of freaking reps with a lot of focus and a lot of discipline and a lot of mistakes. But eventually you'll get to the same spot as the person who was formally trained. But if you can toe the line, if you can run that little program by yourself with less instruction and more reps, more grit, more vomiting, more sweat, more blood, more tears, if you can run that path by yourself for a while, you'll show up at the start line of the next event a whole lot grittier and a whole lot more satisfied knowing that sleeves are easily removed.
I do love this point. I had an instructor in basic that introduced me to the term of GAF, which is your given F factor. And that got me through a lot of the things that got put in front of me of like tasks or things. And one of the first ones that you learn within the military with weapons handling is your function test. And you just run through that over. The only way to get good at it is to do it over and over and over and over and over. And you start to find little efficiencies for you that are just off of what the prescribed fundamental version of it is, because everybody's built a little bit different. Shaun, I'm sure you could. You probably still could rip a jump smock if you really wanted to, for sure. And it would be different if Greg was standing in that jump smock than it would be if I was standing in that jump smock. The sleeve would still rip, but the way you would do it would be just slightly off. And I love the fact that like that's how you, once you develop those fundamentals that you're talking about, not only physically, but mentally, but emotionally, those add up to allow you to be able to do it with whatever's in front of you, rather than have to do it with this one person with this thing. That the dogmatic approach of sometimes when you find a Jedi Master or you find a certain club that would go to teach you. Seb, you got any other thoughts on any of this?
Oh man, there's a lot of things. I really like that as a martial art practitioner, as a youth. Most of my learning was done with friends, just working things and getting hurt and not badly, but getting hurt enough to learn. And I think there's an inherent resilience that builds as a result of that. And it's really not being afraid of doing the work and doing work that's a little bit harder. And there's nothing wrong with having a coach. There's nothing wrong with entering a club. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But the one word that Shaun used that's often dismissed is grit. And we've seen world-class fighters being decimated by gritty fighters. That's happened over and over and over again. So I'm not giving an argument here to the see red guy. Okay, that is not what I'm doing. I'm not,
you don't know my mentality, bro.
I just go red, bro. I see red, bro. But there is an inherent resilience that is acquired through gritty process like this that are extremely valuable for the rest of your life, because that's going to be applicable to absolutely everything that happens in terms of adversity, which is completely inevitable. And if anything, having been through a self-imposed gauntlet really teaches you something about yourself, and it teaches you something about the process, which I think is even more important. When Greg was talking about the baseball, the one thing that came to mind for me is, one, you're focused on the outcome. The other one, you're focused on action that you have direct influence over. The very, very fundamentals of the fundamentals. You are not focusing on your fundamentals, i.e., for example, and I always use this analogy, and I don't know why I do, but because it's so applicable. It's the shooting analogy. When it's qualification time, you're not 6 stages in advance, and if you are, good luck. Like, that is not going to work out. What do I have to do right now to negotiate this stage? What distance am I at? What am I, I got everything dialed in. Okay, let's not focus on my draw. Let's not focus on my presentation, my set time. Let's not do any of this. But what I have to do is this little thing, and that little thing. And if I focus on that and I do it the same, I do, obviously an equivalency for the next stage, and the next stage, whatever those requirements are, at the end, the outcome will be satisfied because you focused on the steps right in front of you, bearing in mind an outcome without focusing on the outcome. And so I really like that, because if that's all you do, which is simplifying the process, takes you out of a rabbit hole, And so if we're going down rabbit holes when we're supposed to put cognitive and kinetic and body, or what's the word? I'm missing the word here, but like essentially the ability of your body to replicate the movements that you're able to do, that you've done a million times. In order for you to do that unimpeded, you need to be out of your head, because you need to be moving, you need to be doing the thing. You won't have time to play catch up. Now, another piece of this is when fundamentals are applied, and when you fundamentally understand what you need to do to achieve a certain outcome, and so you know that you're not focused on the outcome, but you know that if you apply those fundamentals to the process, you are going to likely reach the outcome. And if you don't, there's nothing else you could have done, because you've done exactly what you should have. So sometimes it's just not meant to be. But when you start having mission creep, and I call it not in an operational setting, but mission creep in your own life, where all of a sudden you start thinking about all these other things that have nothing to do with the matter at hand, you can sort of catch yourself. And all you have to do in terms of logical override and reframing is for you to remind yourself of what the fundamental thing is here. What am I actually doing? Because as soon as things get a little chaotic, we tend to go everywhere. Oh, but there's this and that and this and that other thing. And those things are all relevant in the big scheme of things, except you have no control or influence over those things at the very moment, unless you focus on what you need to do, which is focusing on the fundamentals. And so from a metaphorical standpoint, really bringing that back to a baseline, what is it that I'm doing here? What is it that I'm trying to achieve? And if you start creeping on things that have nothing to do with the objective, then you know that it's time to separate from that and return back to the fundamentals of the process.
I'm digging this. I got a couple notes here, but I want to go around still. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I got a couple things. Just a really quick side note to Seb's point about the chaos and the start focusing on random things. I see it in judo all the time with, with younger athletes. In judo, internationally, you have to have a back patch on, but anybody can buy them. The amount of times I've had athletes go to their first Canadian circuit, this person has a back patch, they're so much better than me. I'm like, they're $50. I can order you one tomorrow. Don't worry about it. And then they will beat them. Not always, but a lot of the times it's a non-factor. So it's funny, we pigeonhole on certain things. To Shaun's point on doing things alone, which is very fundamental. A group of my good friends that I coach with, we talk about this lots, and we have been talking about it more recently, is coaching athletes to not need the coach there. It is easy to do the work when the coach is watching, when they're there, when they're helping you drill, when they're this, when they're that. I try to simulate my athletes being alone when I'm still there. I'll start the class, I'll do a drill that is very specific. If we're doing stand-up, and then we move to ground, I'll go, great, pick your favorite move and find 2 moves that work with it. Make a combination, make a flow. And they go, well, what should I do? I said, play. Find the pathway that works for you. And I make them think on their own while I'm still there, in the hopes that will create that grit necessary to do and to think like that and to do these things when I'm not there or when the other coaches aren't there. I think across all sports, the number one area where this is most common, athlete is great at their sport. They love doing the sport. They love doing judo. Okay, here's a strength program, because that is the next factor we need to work on to create longevity and to make you step up your game. Yeah, I'm going to do that program. Awesome. They never do the program. They're not in the gym 4 days a week. And they go, yeah, I worked out. I'm like, great, let's go test it. They're like, ooh, maybe not. So the idea of coaching athletes to not need the coach. Being coachable is still important, but you cannot create an environment where you, the coach, are now a crutch, because that is the opposite of longevity. Because as soon as you're gone, that athlete's gone, and that's not good for anybody. So just a couple notes there.
I dig it. Shaun, what do you got? I can see you processing.
Yeah, because what we're really talking about is two states of existence, for lack of a better term. One is a coached environment, one is a non-coached environment. One requires less curiosity, one requires more curiosity. One requires less grit. I'll get to that in a sec. One requires more grit. I'll get to that in a sec. And so I think what is super important is not so much you trying to figure out what you are today, but taking the rest of the year to figure out who you are between those two states, because maybe you haven't explored both states enough to understand which one works best for you right now in this phase of your life, like this year, like now. And so if you've only ever been brought up in a training environment where Coachy McCoach is looking after every single thing for you, you know, points out where your sandals are and, you know, looks after you essentially like a parent. And so, you know, that's good. That's good. It's good to learn in these kind of environments where mostly everything is taken care of. All you have to do is show up, try hard. Years later, you've won. But I think that there's another path that everyone should explore as well. And that is the path of most resistance. It is the path of trying to figure it out all by yourself. It is the path where you look around for an answer and no one's giving it to you, and you have to figure it out yourself. I love that path, man. I've lived most of my life on that path. However, it's not the only path, and it's actually not a it's not a great way to approach life in a one-dimensional sense of solving it all by yourself, making it all happen by yourself, seeing it all by yourself. Life is a shared journey. And so if you feel most alive and most successful being the lone wolf out there figuring out the world, that's cool. But chances are, if that's what you love the most, you're spending next to no time sharing the journey with others. And that's where clubs come in. That's where senseis come in. That's where instructors come in, coaches come in, masters. Use the word that you want, a mentor. That's where they come in and start sharing your journey with you. They don't take your journey. They don't point you in a direction that you don't want to go. They just stand next to you and help you explore the world in a way that's good for you. And if you're cool about it, and if they're cool about it, guess what? Your life will change. So if you're out there being a lone wolf, figuring it all out or not, consider hopping onto a team of judo players, a team of BJJ players, a team of anything, hockey, foosball, whatever. But hooking up with people who are like-minded so that you can enter into a community again and start thinking a little more hive mind-ish without losing your identity. What you'll find is it exposes you to new ideas, new thoughts, new ways of existence. And so I think people need to move between the two existences, running your own little solo program and jumping on a team, moving back and forth from time to time to see what phase of life you're in and what's working best, and serving others around you best.
I 100% agree on that one. I got a couple of comments I want to hit on, then I got a thought on that. Daniel Labonte jumped in earlier, said, similar to building a house, if not mistaken, your structure is only as strong as your foundation. Always very similar to the military training, especially from my experience with the medics. And this is, again, going back to the posture structure concept for sure. Catherine jumped in here and said, these ideas sure extend into other disciplines as well, like dressage. We strive for foundational movements, but to get there, it takes consistency, patience, and hours of repetitions in the saddle. Not only that, you have to bond with your animal. You have to be able to sit on the horse well. The horse has to respond to you in a certain way, all these things.
Just sorry on the dressage. Yeah. I always thought it was dressage. So thank you for the dressage. So on dressage, I just want to challenge not the commenter, but I want to challenge everyone right now to this idea that you can be like peak dressage, you can be top 10 in the world at dressage and still not know what you're doing in your life. You could have got so lost in the dressage world of making sure everything's polished and sparkly and perfect and posture based structure on the horse and all of that good stuff, and still be no further ahead in life because you missed the boat, you missed the message, you missed what you were doing. You were focused on the things that appeared to be important while missing all of the real importance of the moment, the why you're doing it, what you're learning, rather than how it appears, because dressage is a very aesthetic driven, a very external appearances sport or hobby or activity. The things that are more external, aesthetic focused, that's where people can exacerbate or more quickly lose their way in the thing that they've chosen to learn who they are. So if I'm going to use maybe it's a poor example, but if you are not a competitive bodybuilder, but a competitive aesthetic physique athlete, where your entire existence is focused on external appearances, once that begins to happen, something's got to give. I mean, if you need to apply 100% towards your external appearance, how much percent are you giving to your internal world? And so I'm not saying that dressage is a challenging sport because you'll lose your way in it. What I am saying is these external aesthetic driven activities can have you lose your way internally.
Yeah, this is actually where I was going to go with this. And Catherine jumped in here and said, totally right on, Shaun. That's exactly it. And is the muddied waters is what clicks in my head for this, is that we're talking about two extremes, right? You have absolute clarity. You know exactly what needs to happen, which is the external physicality of it, right? I have these bullet points. This is what I need to hit, especially in a dressage match. It needs to look exactly like this. You need to do these things. You need to do this pattern, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Similar to like a kata in karate, right? Like you can do that over and over and over again, and it can look really good, and you have no idea why you're doing it or how to apply those moves into anything else. But on the other side of that, if all you ever did was learn things by yourself, you're in truly muddy waters. You cannot see anything. There's no clarity to it. So I was thinking of like, you got to find that middle ground of semi-muddy waters. When you go into a new area or you do a new thing, you try something else, you're going to be a little bit confused. You don't really know what to do. You're going to try your best and see how it turns out for a little bit. And then as you do it more often, you start to drift towards that clarity side. And then you kind of got to throw in a little bit of mud into the water to get back to the other. I got to figure this out again. One of the things I was told as a kid all the time was, figure it out. I don't know how to do this. Figure it out. And it was super helpful for me because I like to figure things out. But if I did that to one of my sons, especially my oldest, he doesn't do well in that environment. He doesn't like the muddy waters. He wants specific clarity. So I have to give him points of like, this is how it looks when it's done right. Now you do it. And then he responds to that really well. Whereas my other one, my youngest, I could throw him in the deep end where he can't see anything and he'll have a blasty blast.
So just this is maybe not directed towards you specifically, Chance, but I do want to say this for anyone who's going to listen to this later, and that is labels. And so, Chance, you designated yourself as a person who likes to figure things out all by himself until you stop.
Yep.
And people stop.
Absolutely.
And when they stop figuring things out, now they're laying on the couch playing video games, eating Doritos for a decade. And so if you think that there's only one way to do life, if you're only wearing one label on your chest called, I figure everything out by myself, you're missing the boat. Because one thing is not enough. That one label will not get you to a spot in life that you are making an impact. And so labels to me are like Velcro strips. You've got to be able to tear them off and slap another one on. Maybe even have a whole row of Velcro strips on you that you can tear one off, put another one on, but you've got another 7 there anyway. I think labels are dangerous. And so, you know, you've already labeled your boys to some degree, but you know, that's them this week. And so people change, and some people can change fast with appropriate direction, with appropriate challenges, with appropriate shaping. This week is different than next week for some people if you apply enough velocity in the direction. And so, you know, again, chances is not specifically to you, but I just want everyone to be super careful with labels.
Yeah. And this is where I meant with the semi-muddy waters. We want to consistently push ourselves in a direction where we can't specifically see everything. If that makes sense. Seb, what are you thinking on any of this? I can see your brain turning.
Oh, it's always turning, but it's not always very productive. So one of the things that I would say to a lot of the comments that Shaun has made over the last little while is what I'm hearing here is balance, you know, and it really, it has to be, and it is balance. Now, when it comes to balance, it has a very special relationship with obsession, right? It's almost like they're at odds at all times, but they're really not, because then there's this thing called temporary obsession for a very specific goal. I want to X, Y, and Z. I want to be the best at this for a predetermined amount of time. I want to, you know, do something. I want to become a something and all of those things. But once you do become that something, now you have to sit down with yourself and realize and challenge yourself internally. How much of a sacrifice along the way to be where I'm at today? And what are some of the things that potentially I could now, because I've reached a certain level of autonomous capacity, and because I've reached a certain level of capacity in the realm of whatever it is that I'm engaged in, is there a way for me to do certain things? And Shaun and I had this conversation about relationships. You know, a lot of the guys that are going to specialty units or want to get into these top tier units or whatever are horrible at relationships. They just are, because they've been obsessing over this very, very difficult and incredibly complex task of getting to something that most people couldn't achieve if they gave everything they had, you know. And that's a reality. That's sort of what can happen. And of course, we can all argue that if they gave everything they had, then they would have a chance. And yes, philosophically, you're absolutely right. But the point I'm making is, at some point, you have to be like, okay, if I'm here and I'm looking at the next peak now, and I'm looking at the next peak, and I'm consistently, and all of it is in line with the goal that I'd set forth for myself from the very beginning, I really haven't diverted or tried anything else. I certainly haven't re-engaged with all of the things that I neglected over the time that I was temporarily obsessing. And that is a big problem, because it can leave you to be a master at one thing and mediocre at everything else. And that's called life. And that is a big problem in life. You're better to be average everywhere than super incredible at one thing and mediocre at everything else. And so there has to be a predetermination, or at least a conversation. Let's start with that. A conversation with yourself with respect to why it is that you're doing what you're doing, and when does it become counterproductive. And so I was thinking to somebody very recently who's been in dance since she was, I don't know, 2. And since the very beginning, it's been multiple hours a day. She used to leave school early to go to dance. She used to do dance on the weekend, do dance at night, every night, train, you know, at the age of 8, training 6 hours every single day, 7 days a week for, you know, all this. And she is 27 years old, for the sake of this fictitious example. Okay. So now, at 27 years old, you now have somebody that spent the last 24 years or whatever it is focused solely on dancing, absorbing themselves into it, doing all of the things, immersion at the highest levels, And now the person has reached a certain level of proficiency. Perhaps the person is capable of being a professional dancer. Most of them do not, because there's very little money there unless you're at the very, very top 0.01 of the, of the sort of pyramid. And so now, but now there is an absolute resistance in exploring anything else, because this has become that deadly and comfortable zone. So no matter how many sacrifices were had or done in order to reach that goal, now you've taken the ultimate amount of discomfort and made it comfortable for yourself. So now we're back into, if you get too comfortable, where does growth goes to die? Comfort, right? And so challenging yourself in your status quo while engaging in these endeavors, even if they're very, very important for you, should come with a timestamp. This is my opinion. It doesn't mean that this person cannot continue to dance recreationally or engage in martial arts recreationally or whatever, but your obsession is going to have to take a backseat to things that are going to be fundamental in life to the rest of life. Relationships, developing other skill sets, having all these other things. And because now we start impeding or interfering with the concept of identity. How much of this is your identity now essentially, resting on? And what happens if you have a car accident and your hips no longer work the way they should? And all you ever known and all that's ever defined you is dance. Now what? That's a lot harder of a predicament than most people give it credit for if you are not preemptively addressing these things and having some level of balance.
While you were talking, this phrase kept running through my head, which was "those that can't do teach." And I say that as a bit of tongue in cheek here, but I think that happens a lot. You see people who get totally obsessed with something. They get into sports. They get into something that builds on their identity, and then they can't do it at the highest levels anymore for whatever reason. And then they become instructors, or they become teachers, or they become contractors in that thing, and they keep doing the thing. And sometimes they make great teachers, and sometimes they don't, right? And we see this in basically every sport. There are people that are just crap, even though they may be world champions, they're just not good teachers. And there are people that are great teachers that are, there for 2 days a week and just out there to have fun. We were talking about this beforehand, right? With people that give up their careers but still kind of do it off to the side. They do what they enjoy and they do what they love, and others will just do it because they have to. It's part of their identity now. I got to be this person that I've created in my own head. Similar to Shaun's point about labels. Greg, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I've got a few notes here. I love the note on labels because I see this often in younger athletes. I'm going to read out some phrases that I hear often, almost every day. I am the only way this works for me, the only option I have, I can't because. In judo, in life, we pick things. I'm really good at this. And when you're good at something, it's easy, it comes naturally maybe. Yeah, that's great. I'm going to get really good at that technique, in this case of judo. But you can't label yourself as a Seoinage specialist and believe that that's the only thing that you can do. There are very few people in the world that can do that. There's very few world champions and Olympic champions that can make it with just one option because they are the specialist for that thing. And I challenge my athletes and I challenge my peers. I challenge everybody with it when they say these things to me. It's, oh, if that's the case, then we're done. Then we're good. If you are the specialist for that thing, then we're good. And they go, well, and they always rebuke back with, well, maybe that's not true, And I ask, okay, so if you are a master at that, that's the only thing that works for you. Has it ever failed for you? They always say yes. So great. So there's room for us to find a new pathway for that option. There's room for us to add options. Okay, that's my A1 throw. Great. There's a space for that. Now we have the combination for that throw. I have a second option. I have a third, and start building this base, going back to the fundamentals. If I need 4 pillars for a base, for example, I can't, 1 does not equal 4. So I need 4 pillars in this example for my base, for my foundation to be solid. And if it's not, it's going to crumple. So I love that, because I find people label themselves too early and too often, and then they limit themselves to so much potential and so much longevity. When if you're curious and you go down the pathway of being the lone wolf for a while, like Shaun was talking about, which is important, and then you come back and you go down the pathway of being a coach, of being coached in a coach environment for a while, that's important, and you jump back and forth and you apply these principles. It takes away labels and it creates way more opportunity.
I dig it, man. This is I'm just loving this conversation. I'm getting so many ideas. Couple comments here before I jump over to Shaun. Catherine jumped in here, said, oh, that was earlier. My bad. She says, labels can be passion killers, which is a great point on this. Shaun, you got any thoughts?
I do. I just scribbled down a little bit here about obsession and how you can become a one-dimensional person. And so it's pretty easy to understand that if you want to become a world champion in something, whether it's like world champion at tier 1 special operations or world champion at dressage, it doesn't much matter. If you want to be the best in the world at something, you've got to have some obsession. And that doesn't mean that you are obsessed. That's like when someone says you're obsessed, that to me indicates that you're locked in as unchanging. I prefer to use the word obsession. You've got to have some obsession, because obsession has some play in it. It's a real-time term that means that you're actively engaged in being obsessed. So the obsession of something is what drives a lot of my life. Right now, it's a book. I'm freaking obsessed about trying to put out the world's best book with my world's best friend. You know what I'm saying? Like you've got to be a freak sometimes, obsessively focused on putting out something that you believe is going to be world class. Because if you don't have obsession for the thing that you want to make the best in the world, so dial that back from obsession. Now, what are we talking about? I'm going to give it an effort. I think I'll give it a try. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I've got some spare time. Maybe I'll just dabble with it. You know what? I'm kind of bored today, and I'm going to stay bored. It just keeps scaling back. Without obsession in something, now you're scaling back to something. And if you're scaling back, chances are it's a matter of prioritization. Just not being clear on your priorities. Like to me, this book is high priority, so I'm obsessed with it. By using obsession every day, even if it's just 5 minutes, but it's typically longer than 5 minutes, no matter how much time I assign to something that I have an obsession for, it gets my full time. Just like the podcast gets my full time. These 2 hours that we're chirping back and forth about all these various things, I'm in it to win it. And I'm not in it to beat anyone. I'm in it so that we all win it. And I think that's really important, that if you're putting your time into something, you should freaking want to win. That time should matter. It shouldn't just disappear into the ether like it didn't occur. Every freaking minute should count. I'm not saying like you've got to run your life by the watch. What you've got to do is run it with your mindset. And my mindset is this, that if I'm doing something, it better freaking count. All of it. And so that is my obsession, is making my life count, making anything that I put out count. The outcomes have to count. Otherwise, you're not producing anything. And I think that if you're not producing anything, that's where you start to feel that maybe lack of self-worth, that lack of identity, that almost one-dimensional sense of this is all I do, instead of I'm capable of many things. So being obsessed can create one-dimensionality. But then, as Seb said, once you can't dance, now what? If you don't have those other two dimensions to play with, the second and third dimension, now what? You're in that one-dimensional trap of, my life kind of feels like it's over, because your life was only built with one pillar. There was no base. There was no at least 3 legs on that stool. And so it made me think of I've got a cousin on my English side, not my Irish side, and she was quite a big dancer at ballet, traveled all over the world with a British company that's quite famous. And I sat down with her mom there a number of years ago, and her mom said, it's really hard. It's a really hard life. And I said, yeah, I'm sure it is. And then I said, and then what? And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, what's she going to do when she finishes dancing? Well, what do you mean? I said, well, if she's not injured this year, it'll be next year. And if it's not next year, her career is going to end. You know that. And then what? Because I know the obsession that you've got to have to perform at the highest levels in these kind of things. It's no easy gig. But then when the gig ends, now what? And there was no answer. All I got was blinks and a sort of a vacant stare of, I'd never thought about that. One dimensionality eventually comes to an end. And then what?
And then what? I love the way you end your sentences when you have statements like that. They're such killers. So there's a question I have on this, and I think that it really goes into what we're talking about, because yes, one dimensionality can kill the concepts, and I think it happens to a lot of us. I see it in the veteran community all over the place, where the goal was to be this, then you're that. Now what? You get out, then you have to start thinking about it after the fact, which makes it even harder because you have life and things that become priorities, and there's other stuff going on. But where does it become a rut? Because there's a line between the obsession, the drive, the I'm going to do the thing, and then eventually it becomes, you're 30 years in the military, you have no idea what you're going to do when you're going to get out. You never actually expected to survive that long. Now you're here, and you're like, oh, dang. Where does the line become from obsession to rut, where you're stuck in that pillar? Seb, what do you think?
I think I want to tie it back right into what Shaun was saying, because that sounds like it to me, right? You got into a point where your sole existence is so narrow-minded that you have forgotten that there's a life outside of that. And that's a terrifying prospect. And that is one of the reasons why many people, not just in the military, but many people, the military makes it bad because the experiences are so intense, which burns them even deeper into your core, right? And you do things that are so unusual, and probably the most, if you have been, say, in combat or in theater operations, you probably have done things that most humans will never experience from a level of intensity perspective, right? And so now you have to look at doing something else. And now what we have is sort of a contemplation that leads to you having to acknowledge that this will come to an end. And that's a terrifying prospect, but it is a necessary prospect. And it should happen as early as possible. Like, I don't like the fact that, well, I'll worry about that later, because the problem is later never happens. And this is not about catastrophizing. That's important too. Again, balance needs to be applied against that filter. So, for example, if I've never contemplating losing my kids in a car accident, that is a very, very dangerous road to be down of. You've never considered that. What if it happens? Inversely, what if I contemplate that every day? How much stress that brings to my life? So you can't, like, what we're talking about here is balance. You have to have, you have to be conscious enough of the power of the visualization, of the power of the rehearsal, of the power of you engaging in that process from at least a cognitive and emotional standpoint, to be able to understand that if something does happen, you have a measure of, I have been there before to some extent. And the subconscious mind is a great tool to do that, because it often has a really hard time making the difference between reality and fiction. And that's what, of course, visualization makes visualization such a powerful tool. but it has to be used in relation to how you respond and what the kind of anxiety that it creates in you, and so it has to be balanced. When you engage in anything that you have an absolute passion with, the day that you find yourself, it's so repetitive now that you are just doing it because you don't really remember why or whatnot, is just who you are and what you do, you are now cementing an identity. And if you've never contemplated what you're going to do after, that's another telltale sign of things that will go majorly sideways as soon as you can't continue doing the thing. But also, it's a reminder, it's a conviction. You've just been convicted of spending all your time on that thing, and now you have a choice to make. What is it that I can do about this? I'm either taking it in a different direction, or I start looking at the possibilities around, and the possibilities are all around you. See, this is where it gets really interesting, because the same skills, knowledge, and abilities and character traits that brought you to the level of excellence that you are at are not leaving. They've just been cemented, confirmed, and sort of entrenched. So now what you have done is you've exemplified in a very, very demonstrated way something that took all of those tools that you have and produced a result, which was dressage at the world-class level, or being a tier 1 person, or whatever the case is. Those tools, the being the world-class dressage is a symptom of those character traits being applied against reality, right? So now you can take the dressage away, but you can take this away. These things here are the things, arguably you could, I guess, if you lost cognitive ability and all of the things, but I mean, we can catastrophize all day, but I mean, the reasonableness is to say that you're going to keep the majority of those traits, character traits, unless something absolutely catastrophic happens. And if something absolutely catastrophic happens, that you lose all cognitive ability, you won't have to worry about this. You won't be listening to this podcast either, right? And so let's not sort of start splitting hair until it becomes ridiculous. But the fact is, most people don't realize. And so as soon as there's a loss of identity, they're looking back going, I used to be X, Y, and Z, and now I'm nothing. It's like, what? Pardon me? You used to be all these things, and you created this with them. So now you're going to take all these things and create this other thing with them, right? You just need to realize that those character traits are probably reinforced now through hours and hours of repetition and doing all the things. And so I think we tend, as human beings, to, and I'm generalizing, that everybody does, but as human beings, we tend to cut ourselves short real quick when the thing that we associate ourselves with is no longer in play.
I'm loving where this is going, Greg. What do you got?
You know how hard it is to follow Shaun and Seb on a topic like this?
I do.
No,
very much.
But I'm going to continue on the same thing here, because that's kind of the purpose of playing the long game. If the people who are one-dimensional because they're obsessed, and they're not using obsession in the way that Shaun was talking about, in my opinion, these are the people more often than not that are the chasers of instant gratification. Yeah, they're extremely good at one thing, and because of that, they take advantage of it to get their dopamine hits every time they can, and they're chasing, gotta win. It's like the video game analogy. They're just playing their life like that. Ooh, level up. Ooh, new perk. Ooh, level up. That's great, but that will run out. And unless you are curious and you do look for other possibilities and opportunities and ways to take the thing that you apply obsession to, the thing that you love, your purpose, your passion, whatever that is, how can I apply that to other things or to a new thing? Going back to the guiding principles of judo, that's where I apply mutual welfare and benefit, judokoi. I can apply that in every piece of my life and take principles of judo and things that I've learned in this sport for the last 23 years and apply them to landscaping, with helping a friend landscaping, to building a house, to writing, to sales, to whatever that other vehicle is. Because judo is just a vehicle for my purpose and my passion. I also do some work with a few charities. Those are other different vehicles. But from the outside looking in, and I'm not the only one. I'm not saying I'm a unique individual here in that case of, well, you do judo and you do this charity and you work with adoption options and you do all these things that are vastly different. That doesn't make sense to me. Well, yeah, because I'm taking principles of each of the things of each of the groups that I've been around with and applying them elsewhere when appropriate, when it makes sense. And then you can create the environment that helps you get out of the rut like Chance was talking about. But if you don't, then that rut will just keep getting longer and longer. You'll still be moving on a path, but you'll be stuck in a tire wall rut. So,
oh man, I got something just clicked in my head, and you said the vehicles for the principles, and I think this is a beautiful point because it needs to be hammered in. I think at least a couple more times is that the skill sets that you learn from all these different things, from these obsessions and the challenges in life, become a vehicle to be able to move you around life, where you can actually utilize all those skills. I told people this a lot of times when I was doing advocacy, was all the skills we learned in the military can be applied somewhere else. And I'd have dudes be like, I just got out, I don't have any skills, I don't know what to do. I can shoot a machine gun really well. I was like, well, okay, what does that mean? How do you do that well? And they would, well, I have to maintain it, and I have to be able to know what I'm looking for. I have to be able to see my targets and understand the beaten zone and all these extraneous concepts that really hammer in when you start applying them into other realms. But we just forget that we can apply them to other realms. We pigeonhole them into these ruts consistently. I'm digging this 100%. Shaun, what do you got?
So, playing off of what Seb said, you know, you go through life and perhaps you start getting good at something. You start moving up towards a higher tier or higher level. Now let's call it tier 1 is what you're focused on in life. Tier 1 in dressage. And so as you move towards that level, of course, you've got to have some obsession. You've got to have some focus, discipline, base, posture, structure, all of that good stuff. In order to get to the highest levels, you've got to have a lot of things squared away. And you've actually got to have a little bit of luck as well. But you get to the highest levels, rah, rah, sis, boom, bah, all the fireworks go off, the confetti falls down, and you've won. And so the next day, then what? I'll tell you what I've seen time and time again. A person gets to that point and they actually don't know how they got there. They just weren't paying attention. They were paying attention to where they wanted to get. They weren't paying attention to what they were getting along the way. How about that? And so Seb and I haven't talked about this I would say specifically. We haven't had this conversation directly with each other, but literally it's what the book is about that we're going to be releasing here in a couple of months. The idea being that it doesn't matter who you are or how far you've got in life, unless you were really paying attention all along the way, you don't know how you got there and you don't know how to repeat it again. Good life coaches can help you do that, can help you understand these things, can help you be more clear on how to do iteration, your third iteration, your fourth iteration of a successful life. But unless you've got someone to explain that to you, and if you haven't been paying attention yourself, now what? You're at the end of phase 1, no clearer, other than you've got a trophy in your hand. And you don't understand how relationships work. You don't understand how your inner world works. You don't understand compassion or empathy, all of these things. There's a ton you've missed in life as you hang on to your trophy. So we thought it was pretty important that people understand how to do that process a little bit better, because the process is actually, it can work for anyone. A good process handed to someone else, they should be able to pick up that process and start creating results again. Their second iteration results, their third career results, their fourth relationship results. All of the things in life that are coming down the pipeline towards you, you should be able to take a process and deal with it. But no one really gets taught the process, a tier 1 process, a championship process, become a PhD process. Those processes aren't actually out there simplistically to be able to take the model and apply it against anything and get good outcomes. So people who typically produce amazing results are so obsessed with getting those results that they don't know how to explain it to anyone else. They couldn't write it down on a piece of paper until they've done it a bunch of times. And that's why the greats, the Michael Jordans of the world that have quotes that burn into your brain, as an example, it's easy for them to throw out a quote that feels legit because it took them a redonkulous amount of mistakes, focus, discipline, and 12 iterations of finally holding the trophy that they want to hold until finally it became clear. And then if they throw out a quote that makes sense, that's like gravy, but they're not obligated to throw out that quote. They're not obligated to write a book. They're not obligated to teach you how to do it better. If the quote gets thrown out, it is gravy quote. So if you don't have a process, a practical process, a formal process that gets you to where you want to go in life multiple iterations later, start looking around for a process. I'm not saying the book that we're writing is the only process. There are many processes. But in any process that you reach out and grab on a bookshelf, if it doesn't have key terms in it like discipline, self-empathy, faith, spirituality, self-belief, if these terms aren't being used in your process book, then you might just be reading a book about techniques, not concepts.
Interesting. I I'm loving this. Got a quick comment here from Catherine. She jumped in here and said, I've seen so many of my former colleagues become totally stuck in retirement because they have lost their identities. So important to remain engaged in something. And again, we can hammer this in all day, but I have a question on this, and I want to play with it a little bit. So there are moments in these long games that are especially challenging, right? There's going to be points in time where you haven't reached the highest height that you're searching for, the things that you're seeking. You guys are talking, tier 1 units, or you want to be in the Olympics, or you want to, I want to be the best in the world at macrame, whatever it is. There's long periods of time that aren't flashy, they don't feel successful. They don't feel like you're getting that little hit. And this is where discipline comes into it. This is where faith comes into it. This is where your spirituality comes into it, where you have to start playing with the other aspects of your own being. You got to play with the world a little bit. How do we recognize when we're in those points where it's just like, this is gonna suck for a while and I gotta take it, and on top of that, thrive through them? How do we make those periods of time successful? Let's put it that way. Greg, I'm gonna come to you first. What do you got?
If you haven't put in the reps of challenging yourself, of doing the hard things, when you face these extremely challenging times, you have to look deep, because if you're not used to that exposure, even in a controlled environment, controlled challenge is really important to brace yourself for when something out of your control comes into your life and you are spinning around in the room going, there's no way out. There always is. Once you stop, take a breath, assess, and look at the options that are in front of you. If you haven't been doing that over some span of time, and you haven't given that challenge, that self-forced challenge to yourself, you need to not be afraid to ask for help. That's 1. 2, embrace the suck. And it's the same message that I'm going to give as the person that is prepped for that. Take a breath and assess the situation. I use this to my athletes all the time when they're in a position, in a sequence where they are completely overcome. The other player has them beat outright. They're out gripped, their posture's broken, and they think that there's no way out. But the very first thing I tell them to do when I'm teaching them a grip break or a position move is this. Now, you're not going to stop a judo fight and do box breathing, but you have the ability to take a quick breath. And that breath gives you that break, that pause. Okay, I can breathe. I'm still alive. Now what? What's the next step? And I don't have the answer to how you find that in the moment. I would love to hear Shaun and Seb's note on that. But yeah, if you're not prepped for it, breathe. First step.
I dig it. That's such a great piece of information. I can't tell you how many people hold their breath when bad things start to happen. Seb, what do you got?
So we went for a ride there. You don't. Preparation is everything, right? And preparation includes what's going to happen, and obstacles are not in the way, they are the way. Like you need to absolutely be alive to the fact that things are going to go completely sideways. And I'm going to link two things in this. I'm going to link what Shaun spoke about, because I think you don't want to skim over that comment. That was a very powerful comment. Powerful in many ways, and I think we could do an entire episode on this. But essentially, you have your really, really strong purpose. Let's call this your foundation. That means that you have to have a response for any objection that ever enters your mind in relation to that purpose, because when it gets questioned by life, you are going to falter if you're not solid. So when people say to me, I really want this is my why, I'm like, okay, why? Well, and they give me 2 or 3 things. I'm like, okay, that will not cut it. That cuts it in your living room and with your family and with your friends when you're talking, but it won't cut it when life takes you at the knees. You're going to need to be way more, your conviction is going to have to be a lot stronger than that in your purpose, so that when really, really bad things are happening, you maintain course, or at the very least understand what the larger picture is going to be. And so that's one piece. But now the other piece is, where are your reframing mechanisms coming from? If they're all coming from science, I got some bad news. If they're all coming from religion, I have some bad news. If they're all coming from spirituality and all these other dimensions. So the point is, it really doesn't matter. What matters is you want to have a multi-layered defense against your dream being taken away. You have to create a multi-layered approach to reframing the things that are occurring. And so that comes from various realms. And you have to have an open mind. Not only having an open mind, but you have to have a very curious mind to take the time to research these things, take the time to spend the time to realize how important that critical little piece is. Because it looks like a little piece until everything falls apart. So for the sake of this, of continuing on with that conversation and sort of addressing things that were said earlier, I'm going to tie them both together. Say, for example, almost everybody can say that the foundation is the most important part of a house. That's just common knowledge. Why? Why is it? Like, why is it that it's so important? I can tell you right now, I have about 2 answers, and I'm pretty sure that somebody who's an engineer has 900. Okay, so there's something I'm missing here, and what I'm missing is the curiosity and the explorativeness of engaging in that process. And that goes back to Chance's point earlier about patternization. If you don't know why you are doing what you are doing, how are you supposed to make it repeatable? The answer is you don't. You luck out if you repeat it. That's what happens. And the last thing, luck is the last language to those who believe that winning can happen by accident. There's a reason why that quote exists. And so now, when you're tying all those things together, what do we have? We have exploration, we have balance. So those things are critical to anything that you take on in life, because they're going to help you reframe, they're going to help you stay on your goal, they're going to help you, and they're highly underrated.
Bam. You need a mic sweep like Shaun used to have. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah. not only do I agree with all of that, I'd like to throw in just one more word, and it's not that Seb doesn't understand it, and it doesn't take away from the words that he was using. But I think that most people lack the sense of how life should be an adventure. Like, this is supposed to be an adventure, man, not dreary, not mediocre, not like a chore. Life is not a chore. It should be a freaking adventure. And I mean, if you've got your 9 to 5 job and you're clocking in and you're clocking out and it feels like a chore, maybe it is. Maybe it is because you haven't figured out a way to turn it into an adventure. And what's an adventure within your chore at work? That could be you want to get promoted, you want to make more money, you want more responsibility, you want you want an office cubicle in the corner rather than in the middle, whatever. You set goals, you set challenges, you set milestones. Now you're in the adventure. If you don't have goals and milestones and events on your calendar, now you're in the chore. And so the chore of life, the grind of life is inevitable, but it's how you direct the grind. And so you can direct it towards judo, or you can direct it to your thumbs on Call of Duty. Whatever. That's on you. How you grind through life, either adventurously or not, we've all got that choice to make. Where it all comes to fruition is in the latter phases of your life, when you look backwards and see what you've accomplished. And believe me, that'll become important to you as you get older. What did you leave behind? Now, I'm not talking about money. Now, I'm not talking about labels. Now, I'm not talking about stuff on a cork board. What I am talking about is, what did you leave behind for others? When I die, within a matter of years, no one will remember it. But if I leave something behind in this conversation, as an example, that helps someone else, tweaks their mind, allows them to shift their trajectory just a tiny bit so that their life outcome exceeds my life outcome, somehow I feel like I'm part of that. Somehow I feel like I'm in the game with them, even when I'm dead. And so if I say something today that changes a person's life in a tiny little way, then I'm part of that ride with them now. And so life isn't a chore. It's supposed to be an adventure. And adventures are best shared with other people.
Agreed. I actually went on an adventure yesterday, which was quite fun. I had a whole bunch of work to do, and I was going to do a bunch of videos and do things. And my wife came to me and said, "We should we should just go out and go do something." And I was like, "Yes." And so we went to Elk Island and we went kayaking with the kids and went around the lake and just had a blasty blast of a day. Went out for dinner, had lots of fun. But I want to add this in because sometimes the grind gets to be more than it needs to be. Sometimes we put ourselves in these horrible situations where we get into these ruts of, oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to do that. Oh, I got to do these things, without remembering that, hey, man, like, we can do whatever we want. And one of the things I tell my kids, and this is just fun, but is that one of the best parts about being an adult is the fact that I get to do whatever I want. And one of the worst parts about being an adult is that I can do whatever I want. It makes it a little bit challenging because sometimes what I want to do doesn't always link up with what I have to do. Quick couple comments here I just want to hit on. Dan C., and there you go. I was going to send you a message, but I don't need to now. I'm writing my book. Thank you, gentlemen. Good to go. Catherine jumped in here, said, "Fabulous show today, gentlemen, as usual. Very engaging and thought-provoking." We got Zach over on the Instagram side, said, "Love seeing greatness in one room." And Archangel 7, "If it's a passion, then you still win in life. Only difference between the ones who make it and who don't. Some of us are just too stupid to quit." Which is another great point. What I was going to use this as an example is the collective. When we started, there was quite a bit that I would feel as as drudgery. There was, oh God, I gotta get clips out. Oh, I gotta do the scheduling. Oh, I gotta do all these things. Up until with some cajoling from Shaun and from Seb and from some other people, there's the work needs to be enjoyable in my own mind. It's not so much that the work's going to change. Like editing is still editing, scheduling is still scheduling, but I have to then enjoy those processes. What is it I'm getting out of those things? And I have to reframe my mind and all of my thought processes around the original thought, which was drudgery. Shaun, you gave me an example or gave me a suggestion the other day to do a clip on the on the level upping of my clips from the very beginning to now. And that's part of the fun of it now. I get to look back at like, oh man, the first one I did was pretty cringeworthy compared to the stuff that I put out now. And I get to see that evolution, not only for myself, but I get to share it with everyone else. So I think this is a good piece to it. Seb, you got any? Oh, Shaun, what do you got? I saw you saddling up.
Yeah, I was going to saddle up because it is important, because you made the distinction that you need to stay curious, you need to stay engaged, but you weren't. What you needed was a friend to hassle you. And so now you do it by yourself for sure, but every once in a while be like, dude, you know what you need to do? That's what we all need. We need that jerk friend who pokes us in the chest and teases or mocks us or whatever it takes to get a dude further into the game of life. I need it as well. We all need it. And so this ain't about me hassling Chance. It's about me hassling the world, as I expect everyone to hassle me. If you ain't hassling your friends, what are you doing? You gotta hassle your friends. You gotta. Even if they're the best friends in the world. More correctly, if they're the best friends in the world, they get the extra hassle. That's a fact. At least that's how I run my life. If I'm poking you in your chest, it means that I like you. If you haven't heard from me in a long time, it means I don't like you. That's just the way it is. And so that's kind of a binary on off. And that might sound like, I don't know, callous. But if I'm chirping at you, you're a friend. You know what I'm saying?
I dig it. Seb, what do you got?
If you're not chirping, are you even a friend?
Good
so
point.
so this brings the point of, obviously everybody's very good at chirping, not everybody's very good at taking it back, right? And I think that that's the part that needs to be equally as polished as having the ability to tell people what they can do to improve or elevate or whatever the case may be, or challenge them in ways. But we also have that to be able to do same. And so we're demonstrating what that looks like in terms of behavior. And so if you get defensive, if you're having an issue, having somebody point out the obvious, the elephant in the room or whatever the case may be, then you need to work on that before you start poking other people. That's like, have your house in order before you start going around seeing who's dirty and who's not, right? One thing I would like to go back to is, Chance, when you were talking about, when people, they must do this and must do that. And, there's kind of two things I want to address. First and foremost, sometimes you're so exhausted that you know what you must do, but taking the break is going to bring a level of efficiency that will far exceed you engaging in it if you can't at the moment, right? So I think that you need to know yourself and you need to be able to play with that as well. When you know that you have to do something, but you get to a point where you're down in the gutters and you need maybe a little recharge. That's a little bit of a little break that you got to yourself, but you have to be on top of yourself for that, so that break doesn't turn into a procrastination period. But when we look at this holistically, what we are talking about is really making anything you do in life transactional. And that is very dangerous. Transactional relationship, transactional, hey, how are you doing today? Transactional faith. So you could be praying 19 times a day. If it's not deliberate and heartfelt, what have you actually done? Right? Because we know. Anyways, the point is, you don't want to make it a transactional action that needs to be done on account of something that you think needs to be done in a certain way, because you're taking the power out of it. And so once you start dealing with everything you do with deliberate action and heartfelt actions, now we're dabbing into the concept of authenticity. And authenticity, I really care. When I ask Greg, hey man, how are you doing? I'm not saying it hoping that he says, "Oh man, really good," and then he says "you," and then I respond, and then we got the intro out of the way, and now we can start talking about other things that are irrelevant, right? I think it's important to understand that if I ask Greg how he's doing, I should expect and want him to say to me, "Not great, man. I've had the worst day, and this is what happened." And I give him the level of engagement that he deserves as a person that I decided deserves my time. Otherwise, don't waste your time. What are you doing? Go talk to somebody else that deserves your time and do it with conviction. The outcome of anything we do is almost always directly proportionate to the amount of heart and deliberate action that we take, that we engage in it. It's that simple. As soon as something becomes transactional, you are not going to be as good at doing it as you will be if you're wholeheartedly engaged. I think everybody understands that concept. But we need to start questioning, and that's the problem, is to realizing that it's happening. So we need to start questioning. When I ask somebody about how they're doing, do I really want to know? If the answer is no, should I be talking to somebody else? And if the answer is yes, then do I? And if not, why? So those things, again, when you do that in a transactional way, the person feels that vibration, the person feeds off of that. What does the person think after that encounter, and what are they projecting onto others? So it has an impact, a ripple effect, as it were. And so it's not just you, it's not just how you react, it's everything impacts everyone. So be real, be heartfelt, be all of those things.
I could not agree more with that. The challenge is that, especially with the transaction of how are you, it can be also a cultural thing, right? Like, because here in Canada and most North America, hey, how are you, is a kind of a transactional statement. It's an introductory statement, let's say that, rather than a transactional statement. And it's used in that manner. Whereas with your friends, with your colleagues, with the people that you care about, it needs to be separated from a transactional, from an introductory statement too.
But it isn't.
But it isn't. You're right. Yeah.
It needs to be, but it isn't. And I'm going to use a word here that's going to freak a bunch of people out. It's cowardly if you don't engage in a righteous way. And I'm going to give you an example. I was out at the drop zone. I saw someone sitting down. I went and sat down next to them. Looked like they were kind of hurting a little bit. And I said, "Hey, what's up? How you doing?" Blah, blah, blah. And I got right to it. I said, "How you making out?" "I'm doing pretty good." I said, "Really?" I said, "On a scale of 1 to 10, define for me how well you're doing right now in life." And they said, "About a 5 out of 10. And I said, "But you said you were doing pretty good." "Yeah, no, I'm probably a 5 out of 10. And then I said, "You know what? I kind of evaluated you as I was walking over at a 6 or a 7 out of 10. And do you know how much that changed their life right in that moment? Because now we weren't just like, "Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? How's your day?" "My day's good. Your day's good. Everyone stays good." That nonsense, transactional, worthless words. Like, if I'd have sat down and had a worthless conversation, that person would still be sitting at a 5 out of 10, telling everyone that they're good to go. It's cowardly if you see someone in the hurt locker and you simply go over, do a transactional hi, nice day, and then bounce. Like, if you don't try to help out in that moment, some way, somehow, and I'm not saying that you've got to turn into a therapist or a psychologist. You just got to be a person who's going to sit down and listen, lend an ear, lend your soul. And so, transactional is the norm. In fact, it's so normal that the moment that you step away from the cowardly action of not saying anything, it's almost a shocking moment when someone cares enough to care. And so these casual conversations, all of the casual moments in life, every single moment is an opportunity to not be transactional. And so if you find that you are constantly being walked over, or you find that you're constantly walking over someone in that transactional sense, If you don't have a good balance with the world, boutiquely, in every instance, it shifts, of course. If you don't have a good balance, if you're not being righteous, in these moments, I think you're being cowardly.
I love it. What do you got, Greg?
I'm going to challenge everybody listening to this to view things from a different lens and through a different frame. Shaun's really good at this. He did this to me a few weeks ago. By watching a video I posted, he noticed such a subtle change in my mannerisms, and he sent me a message. I'll leave out the rest of the details, but he noticed that change. So look at the people around you and notice that change. Change the lens a bit, change the frame. And going back to what Chance was talking about with making a reel about his reels. If we look at history and respect it and understand it, not world history, whatever, there's pieces that are important there too, but your own history. What did I do? Why were those tasks monotonous? Why was I stuck on the grind? And why did I hate doing that task? Ask yourself why, and then ask yourself what you learned from that. And now if we start learning from the reasons why we dislike something or the reasons we do like something, then we can move forward and change the way we view that task. There will always be tasks that are not enjoyable for us. There's just certain things we like and dislike. That's human nature. But when you reframe how you view something, you can find that fun in it. And at the start of this podcast, I was talking about play and having to play the game. Yeah, when there's tasks that you don't like, find a way to play that game. Find a way to play it. So I kind of jumped from one thing really quickly to the other there, but I wanted to touch on both because whether it's a task that I'm doing, that you, the individual, is doing, I should say, that's monotonous, reframe it. Ask yourself questions or ask your coach, talk to somebody, whoever's around you. Talk to them, have that discussion. Ugh, I hate doing social media content posting. It's the worst thing in the world. Okay, well, why, man? Same thing. If you are talking to an individual or you see that they are low energy, they're not the generally happy person they usually are, if they are that person. Look deeper, look further, and then take the time to engage in either the task or the person without the need for reciprocation of value.
I think that's such a key point, without the need for reciprocation. Like, to just, in the moment, I'm here, what do we got? And have that conversation. I think this is a critical point. I got a comment actually on the Instagram side. Archangel 7 says, always great conversations. Don't always align, but I love to hear perspectives. And I think this is the key within this, is that that's what a friend will do. That's what a coach will do. That's what a mentor will do. That's what a therapist will do. They're giving you other perspectives to look at things from, different angles to see this stuff. And I'm digging it. Also, Zach jumped in here and says, we all need the poke once in a while. He says, dang, Shaun, it's been a minute since I've heard from you. So I think maybe he needs a poke in there if he needs. And then he says, great work, gents. But, this has been awesome. Seb, what do you got?
Oh, I don't know if there's a need for it. I mean, if we're wrapping up, but
I
was just saying constructivism essentially, right? Is exactly what it is what we're doing here. We're not saying this is the way and this is the other way. This is a bunch of ways that we're discussing, and you take whatever works for you. We're not all the wiser, and we're not sitting there hoping that everybody starts jumping on our bandwagon. The idea is to spearhead free flowing thoughts and get us out of status quo, which is very easy. And you wake up 10 years later and you're exactly in the same spot, doing the same thing, thinking the same way. And it's extremely destructive. And so what you do with what it is that you hear, even if it's absolutely disengage it from it all and doing something completely different, it made you do something. That's all I care about. That's all we all care about. When it comes to what Greg was talking about in relation to challenging people a bit. I think one of the argument that we often hear is that, you know, I have so much on my own plate that it's more difficult to engage with people and to go deeper because I have my own demons to fight, so to speak. And a lot of the times these people are going to be sitting at home doing exactly what they're doing, and there really isn't a great deal of time where they're out there doing something for somebody else. And sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to do something for somebody else. Get out of that rut of spinning into your own head and apply what it is, whatever amount of limited wisdom that we all have, and apply it to another situation, you know, and see if that can make a bit of a difference. And if it does, then realize that what you just told the person they need, or what the person needed, or even if you're just lending a ear, that's totally fine. But if there is a piece of advice that comes out and it's viable and it's not, you know, anyways, you're able to look. We all know that we do that at times. It's like, I can tell you exactly what you need to do, but I'm not doing it, you know, kind of thing. And so it's a reminder that I just gave all these good advice that I should probably apply to my own life, right? And so now you potentially have found a way to move the needle forward by helping somebody else. And so you're getting, this is the gifts that keeps on giving. You made somebody else's day likely better. And also you likely have reminded yourself of how you should be addressing some of the issues that you have in your own life. So instead of spinning in circle, you're action something and got something back in return. And so, yes, you are not expecting to get something from the person themselves, but you still get something out of doing that.
I love it. I wish we could spend another 2 hours sitting here talking about this, because we would get so much. But I think we are going to have to shut her down. We are at just about 2 hours here. So
I just want to hit on what Zach said there, because it hasn't been a full minute, Zach. It wasn't that long ago. But Zach is kind of teasing in that it has been a little bit that I've poked him in the chest. But I want to be clear. Like I said, I poke all of my friends. But it ain't negative and it ain't positive. It's what's required at the time from my perspective. And so last time I poked Zach, it was all about shooting up the fireworks and patting him on the back and attaboying and letting him know that what he'd just done was freaking awesome. So poking ain't just like you've been a bad dog. Poking is all kinds of things. Poking is like caring enough to say things that sometimes people don't hear regularly. Like, I don't know if Zach is hearing it regularly enough that he is kicking that ass. And maybe he's hearing it from a billion people. But sometimes it takes the right guy to say the right thing at the right time. And whether I'm the right guy or the right thing or the right time is neither here nor there. What I will do is I'll make an effort when I think it's the right time. And I'll try to say the right thing. And I don't say it so much that it becomes diluted or worthless. So if it's been a minute since I reached out and poked you, it's probably because the timing ain't right. Or maybe it's because I don't have the right thing to say. Or maybe I'm just not the right dude. But when I do reach out and I do that poke, it's not always bad. It's occasionally good.
sometimes, and just sometimes, it's none of those things. Sometimes you're in that grind. Sometimes, as to Greg's point earlier, sometimes you need time in the dark. You need time on your own, away from the coach, not being told that you're doing a good job, not being told what to do. Sometimes you just got to work. And I just want to say thanks, guys. This has been a fantastic conversation. So Shaun, Greg, Seb, thank you guys. This has been wicked. People have been enjoying this throughout the thing. Brandon jumped in here. He said, "Great show, great podcast," and he drops down an os, which is always good. And so let's take a step back. Let's think about this for a second. Anything still bubbling in the back of our brains? Any final thoughts? Anything that we want to add to this conversation? Greg, I'm gonna hit you first. What do you got?
There's lots. I usually don't take notes in a podcast. I try to just listen, but I did today. I took a lot. That's uncommon for me during a podcast. I am a big note taker, but I'll keep it fairly simple. When we look at longevity, focus on the fundamentals.
no matter what the vehicle is. We talked about so many different aspects of this topic. Do what feels right for you. Ask yourself the question, what is the purpose? What is my purpose? Look at the people around you. Look for them to be like-minded. Don't be afraid to go in the dark. Don't be afraid to challenge yourself. In fact, you should welcome challenge. Have an open mind. Look for opportunities. Ask lots of questions. Be curious. That's almost wrapping up everything we said, but to like conclude that in a sentence is so impossible because the conversation was great today. But yeah, happy to be here. It was a great conversation. Thanks, fellas.
Always a pleasure chatting with you. Seb, what do you got?
Want to push back on Greg ever so slightly, and not just for fun, because actually I believe everything he just said. But make sure that when you're doing things, anything that you do that's challenging, that challenges the status quo, may not immediately feel right. Right? It should feel right to a certain extent, but it also should feel challenging. So challenging, right? So having that balance again, where it seems difficult enough, but also I can take this on enough, or I can do this enough. Just if it's too comfortable, it's probably wrong. Okay, is what I'm saying. So that's one thing. The second thing is surround yourself with people that are like-minded, but also challenge yourself by having people that think completely different than you. And I'm not saying you have to hang out with all these guys and be best friends or whatever, but it's important that you have that perspective. So again, referring to a Princeton University study where they had 2 classrooms, one with super high elevated IQ and one with a moderate IQ, and they had diversity of thoughts and different fields of expertise in one room, and everybody from the same field with super high IQ, and their ability to problem solve was vastly limited compared to the room that was much less smart but diversified. So make sure that it's good to have people that think like you, but it's also good to challenge the status quo by having people that don't think like you. And we can do that, believe it or not, in 2025 without being divisive and without running to our rooms and slamming the door. It's possible, believe me.
What? I'm offended.
We're
Come on
allowed to
now.
disagree. That's unbelievable.
That is crazy. Just crazy. Shaun, any final thoughts?
I do. So I believe we were supposed to be talking about the long haul, the long game. We actually didn't get too deeply into the long game as far as concerned. So I'm going to try to wrap it up with this because we did cover so many things. Look, I'm in my 60s now, and I thought I was a big deal when I was in tier 1. And that was a long time ago. I thought I'd sort of done the Olympics of the world to some degree. But now I realize life is just a cascading events of you make it what you want to make it. And I just kept pursuing. And so in that pursuit, I was taught to pursue, but I thought I'd reach the pinnacle. But I'd never stopped pursuing. And it was that pursuit that taught me the next pinnacle and the next pinnacle. And now that I've gone through a few pinnacles, I realize that at the end of the day, most of it doesn't matter, to be honest. How hard you pursue and all the things that you accomplish and all the freaky little tabs that you get, most of it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, all you've got to be is a good person who's helping the planet in a way that counts, because we'll all be dust momentarily. And what did you leave behind?
What did you leave behind? And I think this is, I had a thought on this, and I just wrote it down really quickly, was from what you're saying, Shaun, is that it's not about the baubles. It's not about the things. It's not about the racks on the wall here. It's about the lessons from those moments. What did those things teach you that you can then pass on? This is one of the things I love about being a coach, about being a teacher, about being a father, is that I get to experience these lessons, and sometimes they're a little painful and sometimes they're really awesome, but I get to experience them, and then I get to pass them on to the next person. And to your point, Shaun, I think you made this earlier, I'm going to be teaching on Sunday, and guess what we're doing? Judo. And I'm going to tell my entire BJJ class, no one goes to the mat. No one. Everyone stays on your feet, and we're going to have a bit of a competition. It's going to be a fun day. So as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see y'all next week. Chimo. Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.